hodu. Here, shir, shir, zichu. Hit hallelujah. From within, pour and rap before God. Hear my wish, my tefillah tea, my cry comes before you. Do not hide your face from me. I'll tastir benachem many. Lean in, the day is hard. My days like smoke, all my bones burned at the heart. Like a bird in the wilderness, like an owl in a wasteland, like a bird on the roof can see poor and more dead baganda. Dried out like grass. Shechachti, mi'echal lachmi, I forgot to eat my bread. The sound of my sighing, kol anchati, my bones cleave to my flesh. But you, God, forever, atatakum, you will rise at the right time. Oh, etachara, yechuni, to be merciful. Be merciful to the dust. Turn to the prayer of the lonely. Let this be written for the future. A people created to praise. Take a look at the earth. Oh, to hear the cry of the locked away. sing it, swing it. Sichu, talk about it. Eat hallelujah, make the praise. Oh, dear shoot, use your mind. Zichu, remember, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Song of the sea, and our tongues could sing like the waves, and our lips express like the sky. If our eyes flash with the light of the sun and the moon, and with our hands spread forth like the eagles of heaven, and our feet as swift as deer. Ah, the breath of every living thing. Oh, the breath of every living thing. Ah, the breath of every living thing. Hallelujah. Breath of every living thing. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Brothers Lazaroff.
With Rabbi James Goodman, y'all.
Thank you so much. Hello and welcome. I'm Chris Kleindienst, owner of Left Bank Books. I want to recognize my business partner of many years in the room tonight, Barry Liebman. It is my distinct honor to open tonight's program. I have nothing but the utmost respect and gratitude for Central Reform Congregation and for Rabbi Susan Talve especially. Knowing that this amazing place exists in our community and is only one block away from my bookstore brings me immeasurable comfort. I don't know what path has led you to tonight's event. Maybe you knew Adina Talve-Goodman. Maybe you know her sister, Sarika, or her parents, Rabbis Susan and James. Perhaps you are members of this congregation. Maybe you have come to pay respects. Possibly you read about Adina's book in Left Bank Books publicity and it interested you. Maybe you have your own heart story. It could be some or all of the above. What I do know is that Adina Talve-Goodman's slim collection of essays, Your Hearts, Your Scars, is one of the most quietly profound books I have read in the past 12 months. Reading it will shift how you think about what poet Mary Oliver called your wild and precious life. It will, if you give it the reading it deserves, rearrange how you do community. One way to do community is to come together as we have tonight, as one collective heart, to hear the words of a writer like Adina. In my work, we do hundreds of author events a year. We could just put the books on the shelves and talk them up to people who walk in our door. But what I really know, is that what is normally a solitary experience, the reading of a book, becomes a life-affirming collective experience when we gather as a community. It is an experience you carry home with you and into the world in a way you wouldn't if you had only read the book in the quiet of your home. It is an essential experience. Reading Adina Talve-Goodman's collection of essays needs to be shared. It is a sad book, yes, but it is, at its hearts, it is fundamentally a joyful book. How lucky we are that Adina Talve-Goodman was a writer, a gifted writer of gorgeous prose, wise beyond her years. How lucky we are that Sarika, along with Hannah Tinty and others, worked so reverently with her manuscript to bring it into print. And how lucky we are that we have this amazing program tonight to share this publication. So thank you for coming, for being part of the community that Adina's life and work is creating. And now, please welcome Rabbi Susan Talve.
Chris, it's an honor to share this neighborhood with you, really. It truly is. Wow, thank you for showing up for us tonight. Each and every one of you, and those of you who are streaming, I think Adina's grandfather is streaming, so hi, Papu. So you know, this is Adina's first book. This is the book she wrote for us. The stories of living and laughing and loving that would soften the hardest of hearts and offer healing and hope to the bruised souls that found truth in her tales of transplants and a fierce love of life in the face of illness. But Adina was never defined by her hearts or her scars. And most days, it's impossible for us to live in a world without her next books, without Adina. So we, her family, her big brother, Jacob is here as well, Josie, his wife. We, her family, want to thank you for being here tonight in person and streaming to see her many worlds come together in St. Louis as they did a few weeks ago in Brooklyn to honor the publication of Your Hearts, Your Scars. Thank you, Sarika and Hannah and Mary Beth and Joe, for knowing what she would have wanted, and Bellevue Literary Press and Erica Goldman for getting the wisdom and truth and beauty of her writing. Thank you to Left Bank Books and you, Chris and Shane, for collaborating with us and for making sure that we continue to have an independent bookseller to make these personal connections. And thank you to the reviewers who wrote with such clarity and care and made every review so personal and mentioned her in their books. Thank you to Ron Himes and the actors of the St. Louis Black Repertory Company, who in just a few moments will bring Adina's words to life. And thank you to the wonderful, amazing friends, Brothers Lazaroff and their musicians, who bring us a taste of Adina's playlist, which always included her father. So many of her worlds are here, from friends she's made trouble with, Lauren Borges, who flew in, to her teachers. Oh my God, her middle school English teacher is here, who when Adina died sent me one of her essays that she had kept all those years. Miss Baker, I can't believe you did that. I think maybe even her transplant team is here. Did the transplant team make it? They may be streaming. I know that they said that they were going to be here with us. So many of her worlds, from WashU and Iowa, her cousins, her glitter friends, her one-story family. She loved you, and we love you so. The recipients of the Adina Talve-Goodman Writing Fellowship that we started with one story the year she died. We have 5 already: Nay, Arvin, Diana, Ani, and Nathan. And Arvin Ramgoolan, who is also an independent bookseller, was the second recipient of Adina's fellowship and flew in from Colorado, left his family to be with us tonight. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Really, you can, it's amazing. The fellowship that you can read about in the back of the book is a year-long mentoring fellowship from the wonderful, really, mentors, these beautiful one story, Hannah Tinty and Mary Beth Batcha, who will take you through a year of making sure you get the kind of mentoring that you need. And then you get a manuscript review at the end. So the writing that has come out of Adina's fellowship, she would just be so very proud. So you're all here. And I know she would have found a way to be friends with each of you. And to be a friend of Adina was no small thing. To be a friend was a commitment. It was kind of a lot to be Adina's friend. She demanded a lot of her friends, I know that. I would hear about it. So, but Joe Firestone and Adina became friends in kindergarten. They spent their lives loving each other and laughing through the many adventures and chapters of their lives, from filming in the forest, being chased by bees, thank you, I had to pick up those pieces, to burying opossums with memorial prayers, yes, we said the Kaddish for an opossum, to bouncing through theater productions, stealing the show, as they always did. One says thing one and thing two, but also the edgier moments of near-naked clipometer shows. You had her almost, she looked like she was naked, Joe. She was the clapometer, you know. You would clap, and Adina would tell you where the clapping went. I saw that once, right? Yeah, and you know, and the improv off Broadways that you often did together. Dina and Joe are still friends. They'll always be friends. And having Joe to guide us through everything, including this event, without Adina here physically, for this makes it possible for us. Our hearts are scarred and broken now without her. Those of you who know Adina, know that she was never defined by her illness. So as I said, this was her first book. But the ones to come would have been about other aspects of living and about loving, most certainly about loving. On the playlist that Adina made for her nephew Harry, when he was just a little baby, between Aretha singing I Say a Little Prayer and Richie Valens, one of her favorites, singing We Belong Together, is Otis Redding singing That's How Strong My Love Is. How did she know that we would need those words? How did she know that we would need that promise that we would always have her love? Adina loved large. Her last words to us were, I love you. She said, I love you. Her words in this book are a gift of love from Adina. We love you for being here with us. And now please welcome Joe Firestone.
This event is hard for me, so Susan said I could just tell you that there's donuts afterwards. And also cheesecake. Yeah, that's pretty good. So thanks to Brad Hartman for supplying that. I miss Adina very much, but I'm grateful that her words can continue on. And one of her dreams was to write a book, so this is bittersweet, but also very significant. So I think I'm just glad that it exists. And so, yeah, I said the donuts thing. Okay, great. Well, we're going to have some actors reading her work, which is a real gift. And so I'm going to bring up Ron Himes with the Black Rep and to introduce some of the actors reading her words today. Thank you.
Good evening. We are so honored to be here. So honored. I was so moved and honored when I got the call from the rabbi to ask me if I could pull some actors together to read some excerpts from the book. And so I went by Left Bank to pick up the book, and when I went home to read it, I sat there and just read it from cover to cover, and really wanted to do all of the readings of all of the excerpts myself. I mean, it is just such an incredible, incredible writing. And we are honored to be able to share Adina's words with you at this time. We have 3 actors who will do the excerpts. Hannah, thank you so much. We are actually doing the exact excerpts from the reading in New York. And I thank you for saving me the work of having to figure that out. Also, Joe asked me to push the donuts and cheesecake again. And so there are donuts and cheesecake downstairs following the reading. So what we're here to do is to share Adina's words, and enough of me. Thank you.
I must have been that man. On a Monday night in October, when I was 20, I walked home with a boy from a party. Drinking cheap whiskey and sharing puffs of his cigarette, we stopped on the stairs of my apartment and kissed. I asked if he wanted to spend the night. This is healthy, I told myself. This is college. In my room, we laughed and shushed each other, fumbling around with buttons and zippers until he took off my shirt. "What's this?" he said as he traced the scar down the middle of my chest, his fingers lingering on the keloids, the small hardened lumps of scar tissue that punctuated the already prominent pink line. "I had a heart transplant," I said. "When?" "A year ago." "Oh." I waited for him to ask the usual questions. "Why'd you need it? Are you okay now? What about the donor?" "You have great boobs," he said. After he fell asleep, I got out of bed and felt around in the dark for a shirt. I could only find his flannel, so I put it on like a robe and walked to the bathroom. I opened his shirt in front of the mirror, placed my fingers on each of the keloids, imagining I might be able to play my breastplate like an accordion, find the right note, and have the scar disappear. Even after a year, the straight scar down my chest hadn't become a part of my landscape like the rest. The 2 scars on my back that frame my shoulders like wings, the scars on each rib that tan in the summer and look like scrapes in bark, and all the small ovals where suction tubes were that could easily be birthmarks or sunspots. But the transplant scar remained surgical looking and wouldn't blend or sink. It sat there, hanging just below my neck. To the left of the scar, I could see the new heart beating underneath my skin. Some nights, shortly after surgery, it beat so hard I couldn't sleep. I would lay awake listening to its unfamiliar rhythm. Bum bump, bum bump. The new double pump song of perfection replacing the wrong one, a single ventricle I had had before. Sometimes I'd fall asleep and dream of people dancing in ballets with symphonies coming out of their mouths when I expected words. I didn't tell anyone about the dreams. I was afraid they'd say that maybe it was the donor. Maybe the donor had danced. I tried not to think about the donor much. I spent close to 2 years waiting, always wondering what the donor might mean, what might change in me. I had seen kids lose themselves in their donors. They make websites dedicated to living the life their donor never got to finish. They talk about their donor as if they were friends. When I listed, my parents, both rabbis, told me a story from the Talmud about a rabbi who goes to visit 3 sick men. And each time the rabbi asks, "Is your suffering dear to you?" That's the whole story, they'd explain. And it's the question that's important. I took it to mean this. When the time comes, Will you be able to live without the heart defect that always made you special and strong? Will you be able to face wellness and normalcy? Will getting a good grade be as big of an accomplishment if you didn't have to study in a hospital to get it? So, when the call came, I didn't ask where the heart was coming from or where it had been. And when I started dreaming in ballets, I didn't go looking for answers in my donor. Instead, I decided this must be how people with healthy hearts dream. In music and dancing, kicking off blankets and sheets in the middle of the winter because my blood had never moved so fast through my veins and the warmth of it was almost unbearable. After the surgery, the doctor said that it would take a full year, for the heart to thaw and reach its capacity. Now, at almost a year, I stood in front of the mirror in a boy shirt, wondering how long it was going to take until the new rhythm wouldn't keep me up at night. How long I would have to live with this new heart before it would feel like mine, and I would forget the years I'd spent waiting, getting too close to death. How many cigarettes would I have to smoke? How many boys would I take home to prove to myself and the new heart that this body was still my house? Is your suffering dear to you? No, I thought. In the morning, I hid his cigarettes, made him toast, and everything was funny again. We had headaches. We smelled like whiskey, and it was a Tuesday. After he left, I showered, got dressed, gathered my books, and stepped outside. It was October in St. Louis and not quite cold. The walk to campus wasn't long, 15 minutes. Even though I had a car, I walked it almost every day. I liked to walk it alone. Before the transplant, 15 minutes was impossible. The doctors explained it to me like this. For you, in heart failure, a 15-minute walk is like a marathon, and that's why you throw up at the end. Doctors often explain my illness to me using sports metaphors, as if a kid born with a single ventricle heart, sports was a language I ever learned to speak. I sat on my stoop and rubbed my head, regretting the decision to forgo the Tylenol. The boy from the night before was probably smoking a cigarette outside the library, not knowing the gift he had given me by not asking questions and treating my body like I hadn't been split down the middle and pieced together again. But now, he knew that I walked around the campus with a perpetually broken chest plate and a very loud heartbeat. And for that reason, I didn't see him again. Or didn't want to see him again. I walked toward a coffee shop. I kept to the side streets and little alleys because I felt as if I might cry. And if I did, I didn't want to run into anyone who might try to talk to me about it. Halfway down the street, I saw a man lying on the ground, his electric wheelchair fallen beside him in the dirt. As I got closer, I recognized him. He rode around the loop a lot, and I remember talking to him a few times when I would sit outside the coffee shop. He always asked what I was reading, but he never seemed to remember that we'd met before. Early that spring, he stopped by my table on a sunny day and said, "You're just lovely." I thanked him, and I meant it, because some days after the surgery, I would look down at my chest and make sure it wasn't bleeding, to make sure you couldn't see that underneath my shirt I had been stapled together and might one day do something clumsy, slip on the sidewalk, and come undone. I was put together fine, expertly, in fact, but something remained unhealed in me that spring, and it comforted me to know that the world hadn't noticed. When I was close enough to speak to him, he propped himself on his elbow and adjusted his glasses. "Well, hello," he said. "Hi," I said. "Walking in the rain, huh?" I said, "I'm on my way to the coffee shop." "Oh, that's nice," he said, as he tried to pull himself into a sitting position. He couldn't manage to sit, so he continued to prop himself from one elbow to the other. I sat my bag down on the ground. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Oh, it happens all the time," he said. "My chair doesn't work so good in the rain. I'm saving for a new one. It's lighter, and it goes faster." "You look familiar. We've met outside the coffee shop. Oh, yes! You read a lot." I blushed. I'm a student. I've always been self-conscious of my reading, as if it betrays that I have stayed home for an embarrassing chunk of my life. "You must be a good one," he said. "I'm okay." There was a pause between us, and the rain picked up. "Can I help you get back in your chair?" I asked. "Oh, no, he said. "I'll be just fine. I live right over there with my mother. I'll get up eventually. I just need a little time." "Can I call her for you?" I asked. No, she's still at work. She'll be home in an hour." "Well, maybe I could just turn the chair upright," I said. He said, "Like to see you try." The chair was behind him, and somehow I managed to turn it right side up, but it wasn't easy. I'm not sure how I did it, and I don't think I could do it again. After I sat down beside him to catch my breath, I was already wet, so I took the hood of my raincoat off. "You are stronger than you look," he said. We both laughed. "Do you want to try to get back in the chair?" I asked. "Well, it looks like you're some kind of weightlifter, so yeah, let's give it a try." I hooked my arms underneath his shoulders and pulled up on the wheelchair. On 3, we both lifted, but the weight of his legs was too much. We fell back into the dirt. He was about 6 feet and over 300 pounds, with everything from his waist down tethering him to the ground. I couldn't lift him, not even a little. I wrapped my arms as far as I could around him as he pulled up on the wheelchair, but the few inches he got off the ground were from his own effort. While we were struggling and sort of hugging like that, he asked me what I did. "I'm a student," I repeated. "But what do you study?" "I'm a women gender sexuality studies major." But the last time I said that to a man, he replied, "Yeah, me too," with a horrible wink. "I study theater. I'm an actress," I said. "Oh, yeah, I can see that. You're real pretty. I bet you're a good actress." "I'm okay," I said again. "Are you in anything right now?" "I am. A comedy at my college." We lifted again, and from behind me I heard a gruff, "Hey!" We fell, and I turned to see a white pickup truck. The driver gave us an up and down and said to me, "You all right?" I looked around like there maybe was someone else in trouble. Then I realized that the truck driver must have seen a tiny white girl struggling beneath the weight of a large black man on the side street in St. Louis. "I'm fine," I said. "We're just trying to get him back in his chair." The man's brow unfurrowed, and suddenly he saw the electric wheelchair, as if it hadn't been there before. He parked himself in the middle of the street and climbed down to help. We tried to lift the man with just the two of us a few times, but still couldn't manage to set him in the chair. Because the man was so tall, the seat of the wheelchair was high off the ground, and because of the rain, the chair had short-circuited and the seat wouldn't lower. "Wait here," the man with the truck said. "I'm working construction a block away. I'll get my guys." He took off running down the alley, leaving his truck parked in the middle of the street. I sat down to wait beside the man, whose name I still didn't know. The rain picked up and the dirt around us started turning to mud. "You can go," the man said. "It's so nice of you to wait, but it'll be all right. It'll come back on the chair. It always does." My heart was pounding from trying to lift the man. I looked at him now, sitting propped against his chair, and couldn't find the words. I thought about unzipping my jacket, peeling off my high-necked shirt, and showing him my scar, pointing to each and every scar, hoping this might act as our common language. Here, I would say, was a suction tube that stayed in me for 3 days. Here is where they do biopsies every 6 months now by taking little pieces of the heart out through my neck. Here is where my muscles were cut when I was 4 years old for a repair that didn't work. I wanted to explain to him that I wasn't good at much, but I was good at waiting. How I had waited nearly 2 years for a heart, and a year ago had come so close to death that sometimes I worry the smell of it lingers on my body, and maybe that's the reason I buy so many clothes and creams. So when I said, I'm happy to sit here and wait with you, I meant it with all my heart.
The condition of my transplanted heart is one of remembering. The heart came somewhere from the Midwest by plane to St. Louis Children's Hospital during Game 5 of the 2006 World Series between the St. Louis Cardinals and the Detroit Tigers. My mother heard cheers as the surgeon stepped off the elevator with the cooler containing the organ. She took a picture of the surgeon and the cooler in the same moment that Adam Wainwright threw the final pitch, a strike, to Brandon Inge, and the Cardinals became champions. In the picture, the surgeon is smiling. The cooler containing the organ is navy blue. The surgeon holds it with one hand. Years after the transplant, I find the photo on my mother's phone while trying to help her clear space for more storage. She asked me to leave it because she leaves it there because she sometimes likes to look at it. I zoom in on the cooler. It is the closest I've ever come to seeing the heart now inside my chest or a picture of the donor. My own heart, I've seen. After it was taken out, I asked if I could bring it home with me. It was an unusual request, one the hospital had never fulfilled before. My cardiologist asked if it was a Jewish thing. My parents are rabbis, and they both said, no, it's not a Jewish thing to take home your organs. All I could say was that I wanted it. It had been mine, and I didn't want it to be thrown away. They released it to me in an urn through a funeral parlor as my own remains. I suppose it does remain, in a way, as evidence of the great event. I now have 2 hearts in my possession, one inside, one outside, in an urn. The process of getting my heart released took a few weeks. I went to the hospital for a checkup around Thanksgiving, and my doctor presented me with a square wooden box. It was the cheapest urn, my mother said. My family doesn't usually do much for Thanksgiving, but the year of the transplant, our gratitude was overwhelming. So we made about 7 kinds of pie and then opened the box to view the heart. Inside, there was a white, round, tall plastic container. Inside that container, my heart. We all wore plastic gloves. We put down newspaper on the table in case liquid dripped. I removed my heart and held it in 2 hands because it was large, pale yellow. Ooh, excuse me. Ooh. Reading is hard. Pale yellow and deformed, but it hardly dripped. We passed it around and said thanks. Thanks to my old heart for doing all it could. Thanks to my new heart for being so good. Thanks to each other for coming home. I thought about the donor's family. It overwhelmed me to think that somewhere not so far away, there was someone young like me, small like me, with O-positive blood like mine missing from the table. My family's gratitude, our joys, come in large part from another family's grief. It's not a direct correlation, nor a direct result. I did not cause that death, but I did wait for it to come for a long time. And when it did, I was grateful. But what would that make the condition of my transplanted heart? Not quite grieving, not quite gratitude. What can I call the crawl space in between? When you're put on the transplant list as a child before the age of 18, you're required to go through psychological evaluation. Sometimes kids lose themselves in their transplants and donors. They miss their illness because it made them special. Sometimes donors can become a way of avoiding overwhelming possibilities and responsibilities that come with the wellness. Kids say that they are living the life their donor left behind. I've struggled with my obligations or to my donor as well. It's kind of a self-preservation, I think, that I have not yet asked to know who the donor was. I might someday, but lately I think more about the space of grief in the transplant process. If it's possible to inhabit grief and gratitude at the same time, to respect the heart, the gift of it, and also believe it can never be truly earned or deserved. In the Talmud, it says, Shimon bar Yaki, the paradigm for Jewish mystical teachers and miracle workers, lived with one eye laughing and one eye crying. On the 10-year anniversary of the transplant, I go walking in the cemetery near my home in Iowa City. I make my way to the bodies donated to Science Garden. There's a podium, but nowhere to sit. I stand with an open notebook ready to speak. I go up and down on the balls of my feet. I don't pray often, and when pressed, I forget the words. Up, down, up, down. My father used to say this motion, daving, is how angels pray, standing on their toes because their souls are hot with holiness. But it's October, and I'm cold standing in the mist so fine that I can only see it when it lands on the pages of my open notebook. I press my hands to my chest. I search through my coat, the layers of shirts for the heartbeat. How does it begin? I can't remember. So I walk in circles until my cheeks flush and I feel ready to take death's hand. I whisper that I have been well, and then all the ways I'm worried my life won't go right. All the ways I've embraced wellness. I might not be able to write a book. I might never find a partner. I might never have children. I might never have a haircut I like. Death kisses me slow, familiar, and I go quiet. I remember all the things I could not do before. Suddenly, the moment of my legs, the hunger in my stomach, the cold October morning, and my ability to stay warm are enough. We walk on and I recite the mourner's Kaddish for the donor and the family for whom 10 years ago, they lost some light. I sit beside death all morning, tracing the scar that runs up and down my chest. 10 years went so quickly, I say. I think of that picture my mother has in her phone of the cooler containing the heart. She told me she keeps it just to remember the moment. Maybe that's what the crawl space between grief and gratitude, remembrance or memory. Maybe that is the condition of my transplanted heart, one of remembering.
Thank God for the nights that go right. I stood next to a man at a bar with a $4 beer in one hand and my coat in the other, and no good way to grab my pills at 10 p.m. I spent a lot of nights at bars that week, and I missed my 10 p.m. deadline more than once. It's the easiest thing, the only thing I have to do, really, to stay alive. Just take the pill at the same time every morning and every night in order to have the perfect amount of medicine in my system so that my body doesn't suddenly wake up and say, fuck this heart, rip it up, it doesn't belong. I didn't know much about the man, or rather, I knew a few small things and one large thing. We both had heart transplants. It's not really bar talk. He was a friend of my friend Joey, And Joey was the friend that I called first. When we knew the heart was coming, the friend who sat on my bed as I packed my bag for the hospital, the friend who got me through, the best friend. She was part of a house improv team at the Upright Citizens Brigade with the man. They practiced and performed every week. Joey called me late one night when she was walking home from rehearsal, and after he told her that he had a heart transplant, she talks fast when she's excited. "He's 14 years out," she said. 14. Before the transplant, doctors told me a new heart would last for 10 good years. Not just 10 years, but 10 good years. After that, the kidneys might start to fail from one kind of immunosuppressant. You might get skin cancer from another, or the arteries might start to harden for reasons they can't quite explain. I was at 7 and doing, as one doctor put it, beautifully. I'd had no rejection, no hardening of the arteries, no signs of decline in any other organ. There are reasons for all of these things. Better medicines, a good diet, etc. But I am more comfortable calling it luck. I went to their next improv show alone, and after I found Joey at the bar, she asked if I wanted her to introduce me to the man with 14 years, if I was sure. I thanked her for asking. It is nice to have a friend who holds my secrets like they are her secrets too. I shook his hand, and one of the other members of the improv team standing nearby said, "Hey, you guys are the Heart Twins." Not really, I thought, because that's not a thing, thank God. We stepped over to the bar together to get drinks and talk about this largeness between us. I ordered a pork slap. We talked about what meds we were each on and what doctors we saw in the city. We'd seen the same cardiologist at one time, but he'd switched. He didn't get many checkups anymore, just an annual, almost like any other red-blooded American. Me, sort of, too, I said. I explained that I had gone to India recently, so they made me get every shot imaginable and then come by for a few checkups after the trip. I think we cheers to that. He'd had his transplant in Maryland during college. Mine was during college too, I said. In St. Louis. Joey was there. He asked why I needed it. I told him I was in heart failure from the time I was 12 and that I had waited for the heart for nearly 2 years. His story was different. He'd never had any issues growing up, but he got sick in college, an infection or something, and needed a transplant immediately. He waited for less than 2 weeks. You're fast. I'm slow, I thought. Your trauma must be so different from mine. There were long, awkward pauses during our conversation at the bar when I should have been asking him more questions. Him at 14 years, nice and willing to answer. But I couldn't make proper eye contact with him. The questions I still have, the ones about death and donors and borrowed time, seemed out of place standing at the bar. Pork slap in one hand and a heart in the other. So I asked instead what he was up to now. He worked in healthcare. To give back, he said. I put my coat between my knees and checked the time on my phone. 10:35 p.m. I mentally kicked myself around for failing to check the clock earlier and dug in my bag for my medicine. I took it fast with a swig of beer, and the man told me he took his pills at 9 and 9. He said something about my looking good, something along the lines of being surprised when Joey told him I'd had a transplant. I didn't know what to say. I should. It's something I've heard a lot in the years since I received the heart, that I'm an unpatient-like, that you cannot tell with my clothes on the freakishness of my distinctly modern body, as if illness should be uglier, more grotesque. I should have said that too, that I too was surprised by his wellness, his unfreakishness. I was afraid, however, that he might take it as flirting. Joey came over. I'm not sure if it was by luck or because she noticed the man and I weren't really talking anymore. She said she'd had to run to another show. I told her I'd walk with her to the subway. I said goodbye and nice to meet you to Mr. 14 years. And while we were walking to the train, I apologized to Joey. I told her I was weird and awkward with a friend. I kind of lost it when he said he worked in healthcare. I said, "Why?" she asked. "I don't know, he just so together." He was probably like, "That girl is covered in trauma." "I don't think people think like that," Joey said. "I'm sure it was weird for him too. Are you okay?" "I think so. I just feel shitty, like a shit person, a person made of shit." She gave me a hug, patted me on my head like she sometimes does, and told me to give myself a break. We boarded the F train, going in the opposite directions, and I thought about my 7 years since the transplant. I'm starting to trust that I might live a while longer than I expected. 14 years beyond in good health. What will I do with all that time? How will I ever be worthy of it? There were delays on the F train, and I had to get off and transfer to the C. I don't usually take the C train, but that night I had no choice. As I waited on the platform, I tried to think of all the ways I could be better. I could go to the gym more. I could go to the gym at all. I could volunteer again at the hospital the way I used to in high school. But I hated it then, and I only did it as a way to spend time with a boy I had a crush on. So he wanted to volunteer at the children's hospital, so I did it too, even though I spent plenty of time in there already. As a patient, I hated volunteers, especially the woman and her Dalmatian who used to go from room to room dressed the same, asking if you need a little love and remarking to me that a smile was really my best medicine. My mother would kindly usher her out of the room or lie and say I was allergic to dogs. I love dogs, which is why I think putting green glitter eyeshadow and tutus on them is cruel. You should tell her she can't come in because she's terrible, I would say. And my mother would laugh. Before the transplant, my parents took me to see an abbot. They're both rabbis, and my mother had a habit of taking me to every healer who rolled through town while I was growing up. Mostly they didn't work, but sometimes we had miracles. The abbot was not a healer, though, my parents said. He was just the holy man. We sat in his office, my mother, father, and I. He asked me if I had any questions for him or for God. I was tired. I had been waiting a year already, and I was declining in health and sanity. I asked the abbot if it was okay not to know if I wanted the heart to come. I asked him if it was okay to sometimes smoke cigarettes in Vermont with my boyfriend, if I couldn't do that anymore when the new heart came because it wouldn't be mine to destroy the way this one was. I asked him if it was okay that I had thought about it a great deal and I did not want to know the donor or think of them every day because I liked the person I was and I didn't want to risk losing myself to an organ. I asked him how I could deserve the heart better. I did not cry. My parents were quiet. The abbot was soft-spoken. He wore a wire-rimmed glasses and had white hair. He stayed still when he spoke, occasionally raising his hand to point to nothing in particular. I think, he said, that these are good questions. It's good to ask questions. But now that you've asked, he raised his hand, you can rest. You need a new heart. You'll get a new heart. And the hardest part, God willing, will be your waiting. So perhaps you give up. Give it all up to God. The words we use to describe the sick, how we praise those who put a brave face, how I received extra stickers and lollipops when I did not cry as a child, how we call people who don't complain strong and often compare illness to illness and then say it can only be worse. We demand gratitude. The abbot offered me a way out of that narrative, a silver branch to lift me out of thinking that things could always be worse, a break from a crushing kind of gratitude. Give up. I imagined myself sinking to the bottom of a great body of water, not swimming and not able to breathe until I reached the bottom. The night before the call came, I sat in the passenger seat of Joey's green minivan, a defibrillator vest strapped to my chest and an IV in my arm. I cried so hard, I started to gag. I want it so bad, I said. I give up. She repeated it was coming over and over as she rubbed the part of my back not taken up by the vest. My heart was beating very fast, and there was a beeping from inside my bag, a warning that the vest would shock me in 15 seconds if I did not press the right button on the battery pack because of an arrhythmia might be pending. I dug around in the bag, and I could not find the battery. Adina, don't be funny. Adina, please find that fucking battery. I'm trying. I laughed. I found it with a few seconds to spare, and the pack was quiet once again. I turned to Joey and apologized for scaring her. When the surgeons removed my old heart, they said I was lucky my liver wasn't failing. I was lucky to be alive. I couldn't have waited any longer. Thank you, I said to everyone in the hospital that week. I recovered. Thank you, thank you, thank you, compulsively like a tick until thank you was the only sound I made an exhalation before sleep. It was nearly midnight when I stepped off the C train and started walking down the platform toward Washington Avenue exit. And there he was, the man from the bar, my heart twin. He was on the platform heading toward the opposite exit and hadn't seen me. We'd been on the same train in different cars. I paused and recognized my choice. I could say something or not. Jesse, I yelled. Hey, Jesse! He turned around and we walked back toward each other. We met in the middle and I said, I'm sorry for being weird, so weird at the bar. Me too, he said. It's just that it's not something I talk about in bars or otherwise. It's not something I usually share with people. Me neither, he said. But you should know, it delighted me and Joey to hear 14 years. We laughed a little. He hugged and said maybe we could coffee sometimes and do it right. Then we parted ways. Above ground, I had missed calls from my dad and mom. Now that I live in New York, we usually talk while I'm walking somewhere. I can still hear the delight in their voices when they ask, "What are you doing?" And I reply that I'm walking. I called my dad because he was more likely to be awake. He asked me where I was, and I told him the whole story of the night, of the boy with 14 years, of Joey, of the train delays, and the subway stop I never go to. At the end, I said, sometimes the universe just shouts, I got you, you know? And you feel right. Yeah, he said, that's like God.
Hi, thank you all for coming. If I to thank the readers.
Those were amazing
they were
performances.
amazing.
Thank you so much. And thanks to Ron for helping us put all this together. Thank you, Ron.
It's just really incredible to hear Adina's words and other people reading them, and every time it happens, we hear so much of her and so many things that we didn't hear. So thank you for giving that to us. I'm Mary Beth Bacha. I was one of Adina's bosses at One Story, and I did these. Sarika and Hannah Tindy, they edited the book, and they're going to talk a little bit about that. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how she came into our life, and about how when Adina moved to New York, and I think she first had an internship at a theater company, and then one of her friends recommended that she come and intern with us, and she was probably just recently graduated from college. And we got to know her as an intern, and we loved her because she was an incredibly smart reader and a hard worker, and she was really fun to be around. And she was always doing incredible things, like she was going out. One night she brought a box of donuts in, and it's not like the donuts downstairs because they weren't for eating, they were for wearing, because she was wearing donuts in one of Joe's productions. But she was so much fun to be around, and then she went away for a while, and we brought her back to work with us, but it took a long time before Adina told us that she had had a heart transplant. So we knew her as all of these things and never as a person who had a heart transplant. And when she told us the stories, it wasn't often, and they came out in little bits, and they always felt like gifts. So it's really, it's wonderful that they're all collected here, but it's interesting that we knew the whole full person. And she decided to go to Iowa to work on this book about her heart. And I think we didn't know how much she thought about it and what role it played to her. We just knew the healthy, vibrant Adina. And I think it's really a gift that we have the book now. So I'm going to let these two. She went to Iowa, I will tell you that. She went to Iowa and she started working on essays in the book. I'm going to leave it there.
So, sure. Well, where to begin? I guess I hope we could be conversational, but I struggled with whether or not.
This is Sarika,
So-
by the
this is
way.
Sarika.
For some
And
people who
Sarika,
don't know her. This is Adina's sister.
Yeah.
And Sarika,
I'm Sarika.
And this book wouldn't have happened without her.
Yeah,
and
I'm
Sarika worked with Adina. I will jump in for a second to say that when Adina was with us and Adina was working on essays or Sarika was working on writing, the two of them worked together all the time. And they were each other's editors and friends. And
So we had worked on, all these pieces pretty much, and some of them more than others. So I knew there was a book. It wasn't a ready book. It was a book that she was creating. That first piece that was published in the Bellevue Literary Review was a huge kind of that created momentum. That was sort of like the touchstone piece for her wanting to go to Iowa and just take time to really take the long look back, as she called it, of this experience of getting the heart. So, so anyway, like I was saying, I struggled after she died with what to do with all the writing that we had, that, she had, that we had, that she hadn't finished. Would she want me to share it? Would she want me to share it just with friends and family? Would she want me to share it more widely? She was a very meticulous writer and editor, so it's amazing to hear some of these pieces that I'll get to, like the ones that Hannah, so the ones that I was like, I don't know where to take these were a couple that you heard, Thank God the Nights That Go Right, and Should You Hold Me Down. Did we read Should You Hold Me Down? No, sorry. I came in. I had to put my baby to bed, so I didn't. So anyway, they were in wild. She wrote in many, many drafts. So she would write first longhand, and then she would write 10 drafts of the same piece until it came together the way that that first piece you heard did so smoothly. Which I remember we were texting. I was in another country, doing research, and we were texting. I was in a car, in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, while she was about to submit it, texting edits back and forth. Last minute, she changed the epigraph, right at the last minute. Anyway, so that one, really, she was everything had to come into place in its right time, in its right way, and it took so much care. So a couple of these pieces were in so many versions, and so the last one you heard, I was really struck by how that might have been 2 essays, that might have been 5 essays, if she had had time to really work on that. But what Hannah did, which was such a gift, was when I said, okay, here's the archive, here's an archive, here's all of 10 versions of this one, maybe this one piece, what do we do? And then it really struck me how much craft and care goes into, I knew from Adina, because Adina was an editor too, of all my work, but what an editor has to do, how much craft goes into editing.
I think one of the things that in the introduction to the book that Sarika talks about, which is how do you approach a book that is a posthumous book? How do you approach a work of art that was unfinished and being put out into the world? And the word that Sarika used in her introduction was softness. I think like that is the right word. You approach it with softness, with the understanding that this is not a finished product. This is not quite what maybe where she would have brought it to, but I do think that the pieces that are in this book are very close to what she wanted to be doing. And they're not perfect, but what is, right?
Yeah, and what Hannah did masterfully was she used all of Adina's words from all of the different essays. So
yeah,
there's nothing
nothing new in there. Every single sentence in there is something that Adina wrote. So it's all her language, it's all her words. It was just, you know, helping it find its final form. So this was her book. This is the book she was working on. It was the book that she wanted to write. It was important to her. And I think the other thing that's, this book was, as Mary Beth was saying at the start, we didn't know Adina as a transplant patient. And as Susan showed, this did not define her. It was one part of her life. And I think this is something she wanted to write about and sort of figure out. But you can even hear in the pieces tonight, what she was talking about were much bigger issues about how to be a human being in the world, and what that means.
Yeah, so that's actually where I was going with my ramble before. I wanted to say that ultimately, so I decided, yes, I think she would feel okay with me sharing this more widely, and this is the right thing to do, not just for me, just to finish our work or keep going in some way, but also because of two main reasons why I think this book is really important, not just for the beauty, the humor, the craft of the writing, which you can get a flavor of, and which everyone must read the book to feel that, but also for two main reasons, the ethical and political dimensions of this book or implications of this book, where Adina was really taking up, she was deeply writing and thinking about the ill body, the disabled body, as a body of difference, as an othered body. So she was thinking deeply about intersections of race, gender, and sexuality. She was thinking about the politics of illness and wellness, of living and dying, whose bodies count more, whose life has more value, who has more chance at health and wellness in life. So that was very much coming into her work, and some of the other essays deal with that more directly. So I think she does that in a very important way. And then secondly, and I think from the perspective of the transplant, the ethical, political implications of transplantation, I think is a very important lens through which to look at those issues. And then secondly, her relationship, the language, the relationship between language and the inexpressible, through the corporeal, so the bodily language. Adina's way of writing about the body, I think, is especially important, and and it's no accident that I grew up in the family I grew up in, and I became a scholar of illness literature and disability studies. So that's one of my fields of expertise. So, as through that lens, it reminds me of Virginia Woolf saying, we have a poverty of language for illness in literature. There isn't language, there isn't a vocabulary for the headache or for the shiver, something like that. And I think there's a vocabulary of illness, or there's a rich vocabulary of the body in this book that you don't find, in a lot of places. And I think since Virginia Woolf, right, there's been some time, and there's been a whole field, right? There's a lot more interest in illness literature because of that reason, right? Because everybody will enter into the night side of life. Everybody will enter into the kingdom of the sick sometime in your life, right? Especially as elderly people, we all will, right? So, issues of dependency and care and all of these, the intimacy, between bodies. I think all of that is important.
I think also, I just want to add as you can tell in the pieces that you heard tonight, Adina was a lot of fun. And even though she had struggled with illness, she did not let that stop her from living. And so this book is also just really a young woman's coming of age story too. That's a big part of it. The lens of seeing it through the lens of illness just I think enhances all of that. Things that we've all been through, actually, but just making it even richer.
And we were lucky to have Adina with it. She worked in our office, but it's a small, tiny box of an office. It's very dark. For about 6 years, and so we got to be with her as she went through her early 20s, which is sort of like being in your 20s in New York is joyous and fun, and she was out every night and taking as much advantage of life as she possibly could. She wore her little shoes to the soles were all worn off her shoes from all the walking. But I was thinking about that when these guys finished the book, and then we had to make a decision about like sending it out in the world, and so sort of like in New York, you normally have an agent. And I took the role of that, which I've never done before. And because we kind of knew she had published the book with Bellevue Literary Press, and then they have Bellevue Literary Magazine, and they have a related press. They're not the same thing, and they will tell you that. However, so I sent it out the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I was at my in-laws' house, and we decided to just send it out to Erica, who's the editor who couldn't be here tonight. And we didn't know how it would, that was the first time we were really sending it to someone who didn't know Adina at all. And she called me by Monday after Thanksgiving to say that they wanted the book, mostly because of she knew us and she knew Adina a little bit. This is not a pity, this is not because I know you, this is because it's a beautiful book about really important things. And so we got to, and then the publishing process was really quick because they did such an amazing job. But it was, that I think also made us feel good about that in 3 days she wanted it, and it was really gratifying, I think, to these guys to know how important these words felt to somebody who didn't know Adina really in real life.
Yeah, so it is not the book she would have written, but it is a perfect book. Like, it really became a great book, and I think a book she would like.
And we're so happy to share it with all of you.
Yeah.
So thank you for supporting it and supporting her writing, and I think that's probably it, unless Susan wants to say
We know there are donuts downstairs. Donuts.
I'm back, and I'm here to tell you that there's going to be one more song, and then I hope you don't forget that there's donuts. Thank you to everybody who, they're next door, and if you don't go eat them, it will hurt us. So thank you very much for being here, and it means a lot to see you all here. Thank you.
Unfortunately, Adina did get sick at 11 years post-transplant. She got a rare form of lymphoma that came from her transplant drugs that she was so good about taking. And it broke our hearts. She was promised that she would be cured if she would do the the drug protocols. And of course, that's not what happened. Within 6 months, she was gone. But in the hospital, you know, her daddy would come with his guitar, and her favorite thing was she would go like this for him to play for her. And they had special songs, you know, things that would really bring her comfort. And this was one of the ones that she wanted to hear all the time from her daddy, so.
If I was the sun way up there, I'd go with love most everywhere. I'll be the moon when the sun goes down, just to let you know I'm still around. That's how strong my love is. Oh, that's how strong my love is. That's how strong my love is. That's how strong my love is. I'll be the weeping willow, drowning in my tears. You can go swimming when you're here. I'll be the rainbow when the sun is gone. Wrap you in my colors and keep you warm. That's how strong my love is. That's how strong my love is. Oh, that's how strong my love is. That's how strong my love is. I'll be the ocean so deep and wide. I'll get out the tears whenever you cry. I'll be the breeze after the storm is gone. Dry your eyes, keep you warm. That's how strong my love is. That's how strong my love is. That's how strong my love is. Oh, that's how strong my love is.
Brothers Lazaroff, Ron Himes, and these amazing actors from the Black Rep. and Mary Beth, and Hannah, and Chris, Joe, and all of you. Please, as Joe said, donuts. Please join us.
Smile though your heart is aching. Smile even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you get by. You smile through your fear and sorrow. Smile maybe tomorrow. You see the sun come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness. Hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find life is so worthwhile. You just light up your face with gladness. Hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying.